Do you remember the last time you underwent transformation? Can you recall letting go of something old inside of you and making room for something new? Today, the tale that I'm going to discuss with you is one that we all know of as old as time. There's an enchanted castle, a larger-than-life character, a beautiful library, and someone with a tail. Indeed, similar to the bewitched rose that permeates the essence of this story, Disney's Beauty and the Beast is all about the concept of beauty, and what it really means to be beautiful on the inside.
But she warned him not to be deceived by appearances, for beauty is found within.
I believe I mentioned during my analysis of Prince Hans that Disney seems to have suggested how Anna finding Prince Hans gorgeous and immediately becoming besotted with him was pointing towards the fact that people often erroneously mistake appearances for what lies within. That's sad, and that was the message that we got from Beauty and the Beast. But what makes this film truly remarkable is the manner in which it dives into the concept of redemption. The manner in which the Beast was redeemed is absolutely one of a kind, and also what made it so successful. I think that there are 3 reasons why this is so, and today I'll explain what they are. Building a redemption arc in a story is an incredibly satisfying process. It involves taking the 3-act story structure and implementing it in such a manner that the end goal is a new and redeemed version of the old character. We've all experienced this in our own lives at some point, whether it's letting go of an old habit or readjusting an old belief that we have had. But with the Beast, it's a total overhaul of his old self. Because I understood how Disney managed to showcase this process, I thought of showing all of you how that can be done. So today, I'll take a deep dive into how and why this happens. Before I begin though, I'd like to address one popular claim about this movie. The idea that the story actually revolves around Stockholm Syndrome. When I first learned about this theory, I revisited the film and rewatched it quite a few times. I have thoughts about the credibility of this claim, and I'd like to shed some light on those too today. In order for me to do so, however, let's quickly recap the setting where this story takes place. While the 2017 live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast was certainly fun to watch, for the purposes of this video, I'd like to stick solely to the 1991 classic version. This was the first ever film to be nominated for the Best Picture Oscar Academy Awards. And of course, it's bagged numerous awards and recognitions in terms of graphics, motion, picture, and music. To be honest, why wouldn't it? The film is set in France, a small suburban provincial town that leads to an enchanted castle. The landscape of the town is beautifully placed, with stunning fields and hilltops in the backdrop of a quaint marketplace that is a fountain at its heart. As is typical of French architecture, it's constructed in a circular way that's similar to the setting of the film. Switching back and forth from the town and marketplace to the magnificent castle enhances the allure and grandeur of the princely estate. It's also worth noting that the cyclical nature of French architecture ties in strongly with the redemption-oriented theme of the film. When one undergoes transformation, a cycle is bound to ensue. You can't change some wholly and fully all at once. They have to complete cycle after cycle in order to achieve a fully transformed state. But there's more. Because the film focuses on the concept of external versus internal beauty, the castle was set in a Gothic fashion for most of the duration of the film. These dark, cool hues stood out against the golden warmth of the town where Belle lives, with the sweet and crispy scent of bread that somehow wafted its way through the screen. Did you feel it too? No? I'm the only one? I've probably watched this film far too many times. But this wasn't the only contrast in the film. The other sharp contrast that we observed was between the characters of Gaston and the Beast. And that particular juxtaposition is what actually makes Beauty and the Beast a masterclass on how to develop a great redemption arc. Writer's note, in order to establish a solid redemption arc, it's a great idea to institute stark contradictions between the apparent villain and the actual villain. This allows for more effective delivery of your protagonist. To begin with, it's really brilliant to have the protagonist appear to be the bad guy. As we've previously observed in Wreck-It Ralph, who I've also analyzed before, this makes for an incredible storyline. But Wreck-It Ralph was always a good guy who, unfortunately, didn't have a choice in the role he got to play. The Beast, on the other hand, chose to do something wicked. And that set the launchpad for the redemption arc. A lot of you guys probably won't remember at this point though, so let's revisit his origin story and take a look at how the Beast became a bad guy.
Once upon a time, in a faraway land, a young prince lived in a shining castle.
As we all know, the prince had all the luxuries that life could offer, but all of these things had made him spoiled. So when a hag showed up at the castle gates, begging for shelter, he turned her away. And the reason that this was so significant was because the prince didn't want to let the old woman in because she was old and crumbly. The crone offered him a rose for rent, but the prince denied her once again. She switched up into an enchantress and put a spell on the prince, his home, and the castle staff. The rose wouldn't bloom until the prince's 21st birthday.
If he could learn to love another and earn her love in return.
If he could learn to love another, you see, the foundation for the Beast's redemption arc had already been set at the beginning of the film. And the rose, this beautiful rose in a bell jar, was actually a visual representation of the Beast's redemption arc. Another note for writers: plant the seed of your character's redemption early on. This elucidates their mission and purpose. Furthermore, positioning a redeeming character's origin story at the start of the film is a great way to launch the storyline. It makes the entire storyline about their redemption. What's more, it allows you as a writer a lot of room to play around with other characters, their motives and actions. Then you can insert how each person is going to influence the core storyline. There's one more thing worth noting with the rose, though. As I've pointed out, the rose represents the Beast's life in bloom. But the thing that's covering it, it's a bell jar. I thought that was absolutely remarkable the first time I noticed it. So now that we've addressed that, let's take a look at the moment where the Beast transforms into the Beast and how his core nature became prominent through it. This is the entrance scene of the Beast. As you all already know, the Beast makes his first appearance 2.5 minutes into the film. At this point, his origin story is still unfolding, but by getting a first-hand view of the Beast, we are able to understand some of his core characteristics.
Ashamed of his monstrous form, the Beast concealed himself.
Although the Beast's entrance scene was only 4 seconds long, it carries within it a whole lot of detail. For one, the first word that we learn to associate with the Beast is shame. He's humiliated by what he has become, and while this ties strongly in with the concepts of external versus internal beauty that the film is obviously elucidating, there's also something else at play. Do you guys remember how, while analyzing Titan, I mentioned the David Hawkins chart? Well, it applies here too. You see, the curse that the Enchantress places on the prince reduces him to the lowest baseline vibration on this chart. And his task? It's to rise to love. This chart is his redemption arc. This is the first reason that I think the Beast's redemption arc was so beautifully done. I also wondered about whether the Beast's entrance scene would technically be the one where he swooped through the shadows and then came roaring at the inventor. If that were the case, the Beast would at that point be found at a baseline vibration of apathy, which propelled forward into anger. The desire, of course, is what governed it all.
He fell into despair and lost all.
So he basically bounced back and forth between fear and grief. The Beast's desire to return to his former self was the most critical point of his ascension and redemption, despite the fact that from the outset it seemed very selfish of him to be constantly mulling over this part. It was important for him. And considering the fact that the clock was ticking, his desire only grew until it rose to anger. Rose. Get it? Rose? Damn it. I seriously feel as though they wrote the whole film with David Hawkins' chart plastered somewhere in the background. Seriously, I'll explain what I mean by that in just a moment. For that, we'll have to take a look at his characteristics. Right, so we all know that the Beast selfishly imprisoned Belle's father, and that when Belle originally traded places with him, he basically yelled and screamed a lot. And then...
You will join me for dinner. That's not a request!
That's somewhere between a temper tantrum and pride.
But she is being so difficult.
Yep, there it is again. See, the Beast was originally characterized as a selfish monster. When the Enchantress placed a curse on the prince, she brought all that was within him, ugly egocentrism, to the surface. Near the end of the film, his characteristics had changed to a man who cared for other beings and was ready to give his life for another. But like I mentioned before when I talked about cycles, this happened gradually. It started small and then grew and loomed large until it broke the curse. And I think that the gradual nature of his transformation is what made his redemption arc all the more believable. Let me explain how the Beast slowly moved away from his old self while contextualizing the 3-act structure. For this, I'm going to shed some light on his actions. So, the Beast originally was cruel enough to imprison an old man, for no reason. All Belle's father did was accidentally trespass on his property. I think that he imprisoned Belle's father out of fury at the lack of hope for breaking the curse. It's made him even more arrogant and entitled than before. Over here, there's something for writers to observe. The Beast's core nature and his agenda was established with the introduction of Belle into the picture. The Beast imprisoned her with the intention of using her to break the curse. But when she refused to spend time with him or dine with him, he grew angry and hostile. That fury grew further when she accidentally hurt the rose that was the key back to his old self. But then, he rescued her from a pack of wolves. At that point, the Beast had moved past his earlier pride into courage. And as I've mentioned before in the video about Titan, this is the most critical point in anyone's ascension to a higher self. After this, the Beast begins to heal. At first, he's slightly irritable, but the second he allows himself neutrality by simply observing the girl as she walks in the snow with Philippe and plays with the footbed dog creature, he makes room for ascension into a higher state of being. He begins to make room for love. Now, here's the meat of my theory. I happen to think that the reason the Beast was redeemable was the fact that he fought off and got bitten by a pack of wolves in an effort to save Belle's life. He could have grabbed Belle and made a run for it. Given his size and formidable form, I sincerely believe that he could have outran the wolves. But the fact that he was ready to fight because he didn't want anything to hurt Belle showed that he had some amount of care and love in his heart. Seeing Belle in danger brought that to the surface. In this way, she became the catalyst for his transformation. Incorporating a catalyst in this way was the third reason that his redemption arc was so successful. We've also noticed catalysis in character development arcs with other Disney and Pixar characters, such as Carl Fredricksen in Up, which I've also analyzed before. As we've observed before in films like Wreck-It Ralph, the act of saving someone's life is the greatest act of courage that anyone can ever display. And it's the fact that this particular act of courage in and of itself is shrouded in love and care for another being. That's what made it so powerful. That's what made his consequent ascent to actual love so much easier. By being willing to learn to change his heart, following Belle's fearless reprimand, the Beast was able to learn and change his ways. He was able to accept love into his heart. See, the reason the Beast's redemption arc is so incredible is because it's not simplistic in the sense that he fell in love with Belle, but rather that he also learned to love small creatures around him. I thought that was beautiful. By inserting snippets of seemingly insignificant moments like these into the character development arc of your protagonist, you too can develop a storyline like that of the Beast. But that wasn't all. He also tried to change the way that he ate. He began to take a lot better care of his personal hygiene, and he generally reformed himself. All of this helped him get rid of the shame of being who he was. It allowed him to accept love into his heart. The reason that this concept is so beautiful is because love just is. It's not a two-way street. You don't get love and give it in a transactional manner, akin to the rose permeating the storyline of this film. Love permeates one's being. And I mean, it's flabbergastingly impressive that Disney should have purported such a profound concept in a movie made for kids. The final action, however, was when the Beast set Belle free.
I release you. You're no longer my prisoner.
In context of the three-act story structure, this was the point where the Beast confronted his core conflict, not being at peace with himself. He made peace with himself by setting Belle free by allowing room for genuine, unconditional love in his heart. He accepted the fact that he could not control and dictate the world. I'll jump back to how this is relevant to his origin story as well as when observed side by side with Gaston. Just one second though. Let me complete what I'm trying to say here. See, when the Beast reached a stage of acceptance, he then turned to reason. He wanted Belle to be happy.
Because I love her.
See, up until this point in time, the Beast had only desired Belle. He thought that she was beautiful and that she could lift his curse, but he needed to truly love her in order for the curse to break. And that wasn't going to happen until he accepted the fact that he could not control the world. See, the Beast had originally been a narcissistic, egomaniacal prince. Not only was he incredibly superficial, he also believed that he could command others to do his bidding, which came from a spoiled upbringing. When he accepted that he couldn't do that, he could finally rise to love. Now, let's observe the Beast's actions in contrast to Gaston. Okay, so nobody likes Gaston, right? Except maybe these three girls. And I think that it's because Gaston likes himself enough for there to not be any room left for anything else. I mean, I understand that having healthy self-esteem is important, but there's a world of difference between that and the things that Gaston is out here doing. He's an egomaniacal, overt narcissist. Remind you of anyone? See, the difference between the Beast and Gaston is that, in contrast to the Beast, Gaston never makes a choice to do good or to try to change himself. He believes that he's already the embodiment of perfection and that anyone would be lucky to have him around. The Beast, on the other hand, is terribly ashamed of himself and doesn't want to make appearances. But the main opposition between the Beast and Gaston lies in how they handle Belle's rejection. See, when Belle chooses to go back to her father, the Beast doesn't try to stop her. Even though he's heartbroken, he doesn't want to try to challenge her decision. And the reason that I don't think Belle had Stockholm Syndrome, by the way, is that when Belle first runs away from the castle, the Beast doesn't stop her then either. I mean, sure, he has to save her life at that point, so the subject of her leaving doesn't really come up. But then, when she's back at home with him and is bandaging him up, he doesn't continue to protest against her when she scolds him for raising his voice at her. And that's not something that I imagine happening with Gaston. Furthermore, the reason the Beast wants Belle to fall in love with him is so that he could break his curse. And given that he's running out of time, she's his only option then. That's where the temper tantrums come from. This is what causes the fits of rage, because anger is always a secondary emotion. What he's actually feeling is fear of being immortalized as a beast. Gaston, by contrast, wants to marry Belle simply because she's pretty. It's less of a motive in the first place. And when she refuses to marry him, he tries to trap her into that situation by bribing an asylum officer to lock up her dad. And when even that doesn't work, he does something that we've previously seen Titan do: march off to destroy and pillage. He wants to hurt the Beast simply because he's engaged in Belle's sympathy? I mean, what is even going on there? Despite his preposterous actions, though, Gaston had an important role in the film. Like I've mentioned before, his presence further accentuated the character development of the Beast. And that's why the writers killed him off the second that bit was sorted out. But there was still something worth noting here. When Gaston is about to die, he asks the Beast for mercy, and the Beast gives it to him. And that's what makes his redemption complete. The fact that he's able to show kindness even to someone who came out there to hurt him. And that was the final act of 3-act story structure, demonstrating that due to what the Beast underwent with Belle, he is now a new person, and that broke the curse. Both Gaston as well as the Beast imprisoned Belle's father at one point, but Gaston wanted to marry Belle by hook or by crook, whereas the Beast only wanted for her to be happy. See, the reason it was so important for me to break all of this down into bite-sized pieces for you all is that the Beast has been the subject of so much criticism ever since the Cracked article that first proposed this idea. But I think that even that fell perfectly into place with the character of the Beast. See, everyone thinks that the Beast is Belle's captor because his character is so deeply misunderstood. Even though Disney put in a considerable amount of effort to showcase that he was a former bad guy who was trying as best as he could to fix things, people launched into the ideology of, oh, this movie is twisted. And that's because people keep trying to adopt simplistic worldviews. A lot of human beings don't like complex ideas, so they try to reduce whatever new ideas are proposed to them. And that's what they did with the Beast. The funny part is that this is not the first time that he had undergone this whole thing, because the townsfolk in the film said the exact same thing. Even as Belle protested that he was actually quite gentle and kind at heart, those people mobbed outside his castle, broke down the doors, and attacked the furniture. One would think that the Beast wouldn't have to go through all of that again. But I sincerely hope that following my detailed elaboration on the true nature of this character and the immense depth of the effort that went into developing this character, you would come to appreciate this work of art. I do, however, understand if you still have points of contention. I did too, at one point, which is why I've compiled a list of some of the dubious elements of the Beast's redemption arc. To begin with, why did the Beast not elect Belle's father to be the breaker of the curse? After all, it wasn't specified in the jargon of the curse that it needed to be a girl. It could be a bird for all we knew. The only thing the enchantress said was that it had to be another. See, this point is extremely valid, but we're forgetting that the Beast was written to be a redemptive character. If he had learned to love, serve, and be generally kind to, or even romantically love Belle's father, who knows? The film would have ended before it even began. And remember how I talked about the bell jar protecting the rose? The whole purpose of Belle's crossing pathways with the Beast was for her to teach him how to let go of his shadows, for him to seek resolution. We cannot heal in isolation, and the Beast could not have been expected to heal in a big empty castle that was full of talking plates and candlesticks. He needed a person to come in there. And the reason he didn't choose Belle's father for the task was that he was still learning to let go of superficiality. It was Belle who taught him to be kind to the birds. Remember? He could never have figured this out on his own. In this way, perhaps a lot of credit for the Beast's overall redemption goes to Belle. And hey, she's not the most distinguished classic Disney princess for no reason. But the truth is that if the Beast had not displayed courage while rescuing, nothing of what ensued would have ever taken place. Belle would either have died at the hands of the wolves, somehow escaped back to her father's house, or have been taken prisoner again and not spoken to him for all of eternity. See, even Belle concedes that the Beast was coarse and rude and unrefined before, but the whole purpose of this movie was to discuss the act of change. It was to discuss the art of finding our true selves and shedding pride and prejudice. Another bit of doubt that some people have about the Beast's redemption arc is in the fact that a lot of how to be gentle was taught to him by the furniture. So he didn't really take initiative on that and can't be credited for it. To this, I'll once more point out that people can't heal in isolation. Of course, he needed help from his staff. I mean, come on, the guy doesn't even remember how to read. Who else would he turn to for advice? It's not like they had YouTube back then. See, the Beast might have been wicked and cruel early on in his life as a prince, but the curse that was placed upon him was actually a blessing in disguise. Because his monstrosity came to the surface, he was able to understand the importance of fixing it. He was able to grow as a person, and that's what makes him a better protagonist than some of the goody two-shoes archetypes that we've witnessed in the past. The reason the character of the Beast was so profound was because he taught us that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. It taught us that no matter how imperfect we are right now, if we have the courage to try to fix the things that we don't like about ourselves, we will surely make progress. Despite the colorful theme of this film, beginning with the stained glass windows and going on to the pretty meadows and the luxurious castle, the film was set in tones of gray. It showed us that rather than viewing the world as black and white, in terms of beautiful versus ugly and beast versus hero, for example, we should embrace the mosaic textures of life and embrace all the different shades before us. We can't try to be simplistic and reductionist in our world views, and once we rid ourselves of the notion that we need to be this way, only then can we make breakthroughs. I must, however, point out that Disney does side with the age-old adage that the eyes are the window to the soul. The Beast's eyes helped Belle recognize him when a new man appeared in front of her, a handsome prince emerging from the end of the curse. And speaking of which, let's take a look at the Beast's character design. Throughout the film, the Beast wears various princely outfits, but they're typically tattered and frayed around the edges. This is supposed to highlight his wilderness. His most prominent outfit, however, was during the cinematic masterpiece of a ballroom scene while he's still wooing Belle. At this point, he's dressed in regal blue attire with hints of yellow and gold that represent his inner warmth and royal descent. There's also a bit of white in there, which suggests innocence and purity of heart. The reason this outfit is so noteworthy is that he wears it in the scene where he comes close to confessing his feelings and finally reaching the peak of the transformational journey that is destined to undergo. The Beast has something like a snout, a warm brown mane, and bullish horns. All of these, paired with his height, which is somewhere close to 8 or 10 feet, signify his innate strength. I don't think it's just physical strength, though. I think that the Beast is also inherently very sturdy in terms of emotions. Otherwise, he'd have crumpled under the weight of the curse that he bravely bore well into manhood. His wide stature further accentuates this. And then, of course, there's the lion's mane tail that further confirms my theory about his strength. But Belle's, and incidentally our favorite part, is the deep blue eyes. They're actually quite vulnerable and gentle. We don't see them at first, they become more accentuated as his character develops. But despite his foreboding figure, the Beast is hunched over. He's insecure and ashamed of himself, paws and all. I think the fact that he wore a cape was supposed to hint to us that he was always going to be the hero of the film. And when he transforms into a prince, oh boy, he's the golden boy of every woman's dreams, from the thick locks of hair to the perfectly symmetrical face shape, elegant nose, and defined jawline. The prince is the very personification of a perfect alpha male. I mean, seriously, he looks like a Michelangelo statue of an angel. Wow! Despite the stunning physical allure of the prince, Beauty and the Beast taught us to view things through a more kaleidoscopic lens, a lot like the stained glass paintings in the start of the film. It taught us that every single one of us, regardless of who we are, where we come from, or what we've done in the past, can change. And that if you have even the faintest glimmer of goodness inside of you, you can nurture it so that it blossoms into full bloom. And that's why this film is so incredible. I honestly feel that the Enchantress stumbling on his doorstep was a blessing in disguise. Whatever small fleck of goodness existed in the formerly cruel prince's heart manifested all those events in order for it to grow and dominate. What do you guys think about the Beast's redemption arc? Do you think that there's anything that Disney could have done differently in this story? Also, I have a question. What do you all think about the castle's staff falling into the curse? Do you think that the Enchantress did that out of mercy to the Beast so that he'd have someone to keep him company without him getting upset about the fact that he was no longer human? Or do you think that the Enchantress did that so that the furniture would help him heal and keep reminding him that their lives depended on him? In that sense, I guess she was trying to make sure he didn't fall into apathy for too long and actually changed from within. And I mean, considering the fact that she assigned him the responsibility of leading his staff back to life, we can reasonably conclude that he was always a good person deep, deep down inside. That's just what I think, though. Please let me know what you all make of all this. As always, if you like this video, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and share it with your friends. I'd love to get suggestions on other redemption arc videos that I could make for you all. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Until next time.